Season 4 of the Humans and AI podcast is finally here. This time we're doing things a bit different. We're still chatting with incredible founders and leaders shaping AI, HPC and GPU infrastructure, but with a sharper focus on today. The roles they're in, the challenges they're facing, what's actually working and what's not. It's real, it's current, it's straight from the people building the AI ecosystem. Can't wait for you guys to hear it. Well, Mathilda, thanks for coming in today. How are you doing? You all right?
I'm amazing. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Well, for the benefit of the guests, it'd be great just to do a bit of intro as to who you are, the role you're doing, and a bit more high level about the company as well before we really get into it, if that's all right.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I am the founding COO of a company called Bioptimus. Yeah. We are building the world's first multi-scale, multi-modal foundation model for biology, which means we're trying to essentially program biology from the ground up to try and understand how the human body works and eventually how biology works from the start.
Fantastic.
My background, I can give you as well. I'm actually an entrepreneur at heart rather than a technician or a scientist. I spent 12 years building a business in the healthcare and insurance space in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, and then spent a year helping to build a business in the carbon insurance space before moving over to Bioptimus.
So entrepreneur at heart, you've done all sort of areas of the business, isn't it? So true sort of business development, getting the business structured, shaping it, go-to-market plans, etc. And now you're bringing all those skills to help with Bioptimus as well.
That's right. More into a deep tech and very R&D science-heavy type of business at this time.
I mean, and then some. Obviously, I met with Zelda as well a while back, and I think what was fascinating about your company is you've probably got more PhDs than I've ever seen any business. So, I mean, that's got to be challenging itself being a COO of a company with that many brilliant minds.
It is daunting and humbling every day. But what I can say is it is the nicest and most humble group of people I've ever worked with. And I think because everyone understands the enormity of the task that we're trying to accomplish, and everyone realizes that no one has the breadth and the depth. So everyone has depth in an area or two, and they understand in order to make this work, we have to bring it together. Because that's the nature of biology. People spend 20 years studying one protein. And we're trying to bring, the understanding of proteins and DNA and RNA and how cells work in tissue and how the tissues interact in your human body. There's no one who has all of that depth, and everyone's just sort of humbly approaching our problem together, and it's incredible.
I mean, I think that's it, because we talk about AI, we talk about large language models, agentic AI, all these different things, and it's a huge, huge industry. But when you take that and put it into biology, that's got to be a whole level more of complexity.
Yes. So, ChatGPT has, and OpenAI, Anthropic, your LLM companies have made enormous strides in demonstrating the power of AI using text and language and all of the words that are out there on the internet, right? But that's sort of one context layer, whereas biology, as I just described, has lots of different languages, and most of it isn't known. So we only really know a few % of how biology actually works after thousands of years of humans being on this earth. And so it's almost like, trying to decipher a new language where the definitions of the words are in random books scattered across libraries around the world, and each book costs $10,000 to read, and you're trying to then understand how the language all works as you put it together. And, simple things like, large language models are trying to predict the next word, or they're trying to, identify words that have been masked, for example. That's how these models are trained. Well, you can't do that so easily in biology, because if you just take a simple thing like your genome, right, which most of which, and we don't even know, between sort of 10 and 40% of which is actually meaningful. And the other percent, up to 90% of it, does nothing that we know of. So predicting the next might mean that 9 out of 10 things that you predict are totally meaningless and are just noise. So, or they do have meaning and we just haven't figured it out yet. But there's just so much of that to trudge through. And most of the data is sitting fragmented in lockers somewhere held in pharma or in research labs, and you've got to try and unpick it all to make these large models able to have enough volume of data to actually make sense of the world.
I can imagine. I mean, it's so complex and so much work. I mean, and like I say, you need a lot of compute power to get through all this data and actually try and make sense of it, as you say.
Yeah.
What are some of the, other than obviously that, what are some of the biggest challenges and risks you have with obviously trying to complete this sort of mission that you're working on?
The most difficult challenge is the data. There is order of magnitudes less data in biology that is relevant for training models and that is sort of high enough quality and that has enough depth to train these models than there is in large language models. And it's, those that do exist are typically not publicly available. So that's the hardest thing. Yeah. And, when we're making, let's say, bets on which kind of data is it that will power these models, some of that data might cost us, let's say it might cost 10 million today to buy a data set for 5,000 patients. In a year's time, the costs might be $1 million to buy the same set of data. And someone might have put out millions of that information for free. And so that's no longer the data that costs any money or that has any value. So, it's moving so quickly that, the bets you're making may or may not be the most important value drivers in the next year. And that's what's tricky.
Do you know what? The thought of actually spending 10 million then the next year it being free or just, half the value is not even something I would have thought of, to be fair. Yeah. And then, so you've got that. And working with biology, health, it's a very sensitive subject. I suppose there's a huge ethical implication, particularly with AI and biology and the human body. How do you guys navigate that then?
So diversity is, of course, has to be a fundamental part of the data that we're trying to gather and to generate and to buy. And that's actually, surprisingly, not only diversity in, people, whether it's gender diversity, ethnic background diversity. There's also simple things that, people who aren't in this space don't really understand, but, differences in the technology of the scanner can actually bias a model and does bias most models. So if you're not having a diversity of types of scanners of a biopsy, for example, you are actually training the model potentially to overfit to one type of technology. And similar for types of clinics and type of pathologists who make notes. You need to have diversity on so many levels in the data. You see how complicated this is.
Just a little bit. It's enough to make your head spin.
Yeah.
So obviously you're doing that. And then as the COO sitting in the business, you're, I don't think, technical. So, so how do you work in a business that's hugely, hugely technical and are able to work with those individuals? We already talked brilliant minds. Some of them have come from likes of Google DeepMind and what have you.
Yes.
How do you create a business that enables them to do some of their best work? Because I think that's the other thing is that we have the saying over here, like herding cats, pulling them all together and organising that business. Yeah. What do you do to really make that fully operational?
I'm fortunate to be a founding COO in a time when there's a lot of solutions out there, a lot of people trying to solve for enhancing productivity and efficiency in the back office of companies, right? So, some of my responsibilities are your classic, more administrative things, right? Like legal and HR and, to some extent, investor relations and finance. All those things can have a huge amount of the work is really automatable. It's mundane, repetitive tasks that mostly human beings have been taking and doing for centuries. And I'm fortunate to be able to actually build a back office, if you will. And actually now we're driving a front office too that can start from an agentic base. And what that means is my first 2 hires were AI ops people. So we came up with this title of an AI ops person. And what that means is they have generalist skills, so typically kind of some sort of consulting skills or have worked in a startup and done a little bit of everything. So they kind of know what good looks like across a lot of things. But they're also machine learning experts. They know how to code. They build agents themselves. So what we're putting together and is actually a team where I'll have functional experts, people who know what good looks like in the legal realm, in finance, but then also a layer of people who are building and maintaining and evaluating and rebuilding the automated agentic layers underneath.
Wow, right. So you're actually building a whole AI toolkit internally to help the business.
Yeah, and we have to be careful not to build it all ourselves, because some of the things we're thinking about, we're sort of saying these could become businesses in their own right. We need to be careful not to reinvent every part of the back office. But the reality is that most tools that we look at that are out there today trying to solve some of these problems, they don't do a great job yet. They do a great job in one or two applications within that field. So legal is a good example. There are a lot of tools that have, that people will know about out there, Harvey and Legora. And now there's a new one in the UK, I think, called Wilson. They can do a lot of the work for you, but they're not cross-functional. And that's where we start to see where the value starts to come in, where, you can connect it to your data security or to your regulatory monitoring, or seeing whether we're compliant with our legal contracts across the insurance policies we have, or our IT security policies. You want all of those links to be made.
So as the COO, so your function, obviously you've hired these AI specialists coming in, AI ops specialists, which arguably haven't really been hired before. In previous roles that you've had, this is new. This is moving with the times. Do you feel like it's completely changed the perspective of what you think an operations function should actually look and feel like now then?
That's what we're building. But the reality is the first few months is just everybody scrambling to get stuff done. And us trying to work out what is the right blend of having people who can do the work and having people who can help us to automate and remove some of those mundane tasks. So we're in the build phase now. And we feel like we're also the curators and the owners of which are the best productivity tools out there. And we feel an ownership of making sure that if, like Notion AI right now we use Notion. I don't know if you know of Notion. It's a really good documentation kind of tool, but they've built an AI which connects into your emails, into Slack, into all of your Notion documentation. And the people I work with are excellent at documenting everything. And therefore it can connect into everything. You could ask it any question. So we did our IT security policies today, are we compliant with ISO standard, X, Y, and Z? And it tracked everything from what's in our documentation against the ISO standard, to also seeing it looks like you haven't had any these quarterly meetings in time, or somebody asked a question in Slack which shows that potentially you need to think about your who has access to this or that platform. So it's actually there are some brilliant tools out there that can really help shortcut things these days. And we have to not be, over-intellectualize our job now and try to reinvent the wheel everywhere, because there's some cool tools coming out.
I can imagine, obviously, that's different from what you've done before previously. And then with all that experience as serial entrepreneur, and then you've brought it into here, when you look at that and you look at what you're trying to sort of strive for and really to help grow the business, do you see any particular risks? I think obviously a lot of our experience sometimes actually helps us look to the future. Yeah. Do you see any sort of risks in terms of how you guys are scaling the business, whether it be from the access to data, whether it be from actually how you're operationalizing the business? It's a crazy competitive market now. The price of compute power is an interesting topic. But what do you think are the main things that you need to sort of navigate?
So for us, our competitors or people out there trying to do a similar thing are capitalized like 10x what we are. I mean, we raised $80 million pre-revenue, right? So we already have raised an enormous amount. But our competitors have raised $600-700 million, and sort of that doesn't mean that they will be more successful. They may not take as direct a route to the end goal as we do. But I think one of the key challenges in this market is optimizing your bets and the capital that you spend on what, right? I was hearing a talk by one of the Nobel Prize winners last year, the Google DeepMind, the guy who sort of invented or designed AlphaFold, which is the most successful foundation model in biology, which helps predict protein structures. And he showed a picture of the team that actually made it happen. And there was about 15 people in a picture, right? So you imagine sometimes that there needs to be 20,000 people working on a problem to solve it. But actually, it's the sort of 15 people. So, what I would say the most difficult thing is the capital bets and the path to get there. Because, we have the same end goal as a lot of different companies. But what are what's the way we're going to get there in terms of which type of disease that you target first? Are we going commercial early, and will we be diverted by commercial interests that are more short-termists? Those are some of the challenges, because we have to go big pretty quick. And that's not a challenge that I faced in some of my other businesses.
I can imagine. And then the other thing, so in September, I'm going to just get the acronym. So SAB, you guys opened a scientific advisory board.
Yes.
How's that going to help you with the future?
So the advisory board we've compiled is the cream of the crop in biology, science, and machine learning. And they will help advise us on this path, right? What are the most sort of attractive diseases or problems to solve in the pharma space? Which are the techniques when it comes to machine learning that have worked? Because there's developments in science happening constantly, many of them in those people's labs, where we're trying to understand, we're having to design completely new architectures in the back end from a machine learning perspective, and they will help advise us on that. They also have networks in the data generation space, right? They also have networks in the pharma space. They'll also help open those doors and make sure that we're visible to people making decisions here. So, a scientific advisory board will help guide your strategy and, design your path, but they'll also open doors, hopefully.
Yeah, well, I looked at them and I thought, oh, crikey, there's the other PhD people.
Yeah.
More. So you added to them.
It's been interesting. What's been interesting is we've, this last few months, we've brought on board, our first commercial and product people. And we are moving from, being pretty R&D heavy to being more product centric now. And that's also an interesting challenge, like preserving the core R&D, because that's going to be absolutely critical to our success, and yet trying to figure out how you spin out really interesting commercial propositions without destroying the long-term path.
Yeah, and not just that. Obviously, that's from a technical perspective, but your business has changed, like you say, you've just hired all these new teams. How are you sort of managing the culture and the growth of the organisation? Because it's quite astounding the types of people that you've hired and your founding members. And then bringing those in, I imagine anybody coming in, that's quite daunting to sit in a room with some of those individuals. And I know they're really humble and nice, normal people. Yeah. But how do you actually go about bringing in those new people and then building out a culture that's positive, productive, all the things that you need to do as you change from being startup to maybe not quite scale up yet, but that's obviously the journey that hopefully you're going on.
Yeah, and that's where agents will not solve that problem, So everyone out there looking for the next job, it still matters your EQ and how you think and observe how people work well together and what motivates people. So first of all, we've developed some pretty intensive onboarding. People join and have their own dedicated page with, designed in a very ML way, like P0, P1, P2, P3 reading materials, and a little checklist of getting through all of that. We are starting to record, 101s, sort of deep dives in different areas that you can then go and watch. People are, of course, involved in every tech meeting. Everyone's invited. So all of our 3-week sprints, we have planning meetings, and we also have retrospectives at the end of every 3 weeks that go deep into a topic and something we've learned. Everyone's invited to all of those and immerse themselves fully in that. But for me, it's about, I think it's really important to still make sure you get a pulse from people by speaking to people. And we are remote first, which makes that even harder. But I have a 15-minute slot booked in with everyone once a month. So, we're now 25 people, which means I have 25 15-minute meetings spread out. And they normally on a Monday, 2 to 3 of 15-minute meetings. And it's surprising how much you gather in terms of the pulse and the motivation and what's maybe unclear suddenly, or whether there's something like a tension starting to build. You get it from those 15-minute meetings. And for me, those are invaluable.
And then obviously you're remote first. So how do you get that sort of human contact? I mean, great, I'm doing Teams meetings or Zoom meetings, but do you guys all congregate in Paris or to create that sort of social element?
Yes, once a month we are in Paris. So the third week of every calendar month we meet there, and it becomes a very social week while we're there. There's dinners and there's workshops, and but most of our teams also need a lot of focus time. So therefore it kind of works to have 2 or 3 weeks off and a week on. Yeah. But every week there's also a round robin of everyone being thrown into this pot of you get assigned a one-on-one buddy once a week, and for 15 minutes you sort of join a call, and there's somebody randomly assigned to you, and you get to spend 15 minutes with those people. So there's a little bit of forced trying to make people speak to each other because it's hard.
And then in terms of, obviously you are growing, what does the future look like in the sort of, short to medium term? So like, the next 12 months, sort of 2 years, what are the major sort of key sort of milestones that you guys are aiming for?
There are 3 big things. So first is we are about to put out our first multi-modal model. So we put out 1 year ago a single modality model, our H0 or H1 models. It's still the best performing models in the space. After a year, it's pretty impressive. And we're about to put out our first version of putting lots of modalities together, which we expect to drive a significant bump in performance across a number of really interesting use cases in oncology, in cancer. That's the really big thing. The second is that we are bringing on board our first clients now. So we'll have a set of very different types of users because they're all coming to us from lots of different angles. So we already are, looking to sign up our first couple of users by the end of this year. And the third thing is probably, looking towards when we talk about 18 months to 2 years, we are going to ultimately be raising more capital as well. So that's kind of what's in our ultimate runway. And sorry, the fourth thing is data generation. So we are putting together some pretty cool thoughts around how we're going to generate this data, and we're having some really interesting discussions that we hope we'll be able to announce over the next couple of months that will really put us in a great positioning for how we do this and achieve our goals.
Well, it certainly sounds very exciting. It's going to be very busy by the sounds of it.
Yes.
Just for the benefit, I always ask this question, so I'm going to ask you as well.
Yeah,
not going to leave you out. But we get a lot of people that are startups, small, very early stage. Often CEOs could be software engineers, not necessarily done it before. They've moved into the entrepreneurial world, pretty early on in their career themselves. Yeah. From your experience of successfully building businesses, what are the sort of first things you recommend people do as they start a company off?
First, most important thing is who are your co-founders or who are the first people you hire. That's absolutely critical. It can make or break your business. So that's the first thing I would do. And second thing is really, really think hard about the capital that you bring in. Do you need it? Are those people the right people for you? It's an extremely hard thing to sort of say, no, turn money away, but really try to bootstrap as much as possible because you end up giving away a lot early to people who have an aim to buy low and sell high, and they will drive your business in a direction and in a 2 or 3 year cycle that doesn't help you achieve your long-term vision. So those are the 2 most important things, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. When you're building a product or something like that, you obviously need the capital early. Obviously, bootstrapping is great, but I can imagine, getting somebody that sort of marries up to your values and your philosophy. Of course, they've got money talks that they want to return.
Yeah.
But I can imagine getting one that sort of works with you in the right way and gives you expertise and advice in some cases as well. But this has been brilliant. I think it's been exciting. Obviously, great chat with Zelda, and it's amazing what you guys have done so far. So it does sound like the next sort of year, 2 years is going to be extremely busy. So we'll have to talk about having you again.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Look forward to it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers. And that's it for this week's episode of Humans in AI. A huge thanks to my guests for sharing their insights and to you for tuning in. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to hit follow, share it with someone in your network, and let me know what you think. There's plenty more coming this season as we dive deeper into the people, the companies, and the ideas shaping AI right now. See you next time.